finally back live. We've been doing a lot of best of shows as we got into the final stretch of campaign time, and the primary is over. We have our nominees in the Republican Party. The Democrats have their nominees, and there's also a bunch of local races and ballot initiatives that have been and tax levies that have been resolved. But tonight we're going to just go back to the news and talk about what's happening in the news, because we've now, we're a week past Election Day. And today, here we are with Stephen Lloyd, the state chairman of the Young Republicans, who is joining us as one of our semi-regular guests here, or guest hosts on the Captive Audience. Thanks for joining me here tonight, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It's always a pleasure to come out and chat with you about the latest news. All you candidates out there that are gearing up for this next election cycle, reach out to the Young Republicans. We want to give them opportunities to work their tails off for you. So come on, visit us.
And I can tell you there will be no shortage of requests from Monique Despain's campaign. I already know that.
Awesome.
Whom you guys endorsed, and she prevailed last week. And we are a state that can make a huge difference in who controls the House of Representatives, which has just not been the case until just 2 years ago. We were not a state that played a significant role in Congress because we had one seat. It was sort of the automatic seat that we won over and over, which is the 2nd district. And then the other seats we didn't really have, but we'd try, but we just didn't have a great opportunity. And as it turns out, this time we have not just one, not just two, but 3 seats that are jump balls, one that we want to keep and 2 that we want to win. So, and as the Oregon Democrats said recently at their gala fundraiser in Portland, as the pro-Hamas protesters beat on the windows outside, they said the road to control of the House of Representatives runs through Oregon.
Absolutely. I'm super excited about it, that finally Oregon is getting to a position where we can be in play in the political system. And I really hope to see us really successful this election season. And it's going to take hard work. And so we're ready to double down.
All right. Well, that sounds good. Well, let's launch into some national politics here, because there's a lot happening. It seems like constantly we are inundated with news from these court cases. The closing arguments wrapped up today in the so-called Trump hush money trial. It is the trial that about a non-crime that implicates an unspecified underlying non-crime that that will probably be. I predict there will be a guilty verdict from a jury that just doesn't like him, and that's all they needed. They just had to not like him and not look at the facts, and they're being instructed by a judge who won't allow evidence that exonerates him and discredits the prosecution's case into the testimony. Now, I understand that people are going to provide that. We're going to watch and see what the judge provides to the jury as instructions on what they're supposed to do and not do. And most appeals cases often hinge on what those instructions are. If the judge does something that, as has been his habit, Judge Merchan, that, really doesn't sound like the instructions a judge should be giving a jury, and very biased, then this one's going to be overturned on appeal. And the Democrats don't care, because they just want the headline that, found guilty, felon or whatever. And also on top of that, today in the closing arguments, which is usually a time when just the prosecutor gives their closing argument, the defense gives their closing argument. They say whatever they want. The jury then gets to hear those presentations, and which are, each side's spin on the evidence, and then they go off and they make their decision. But actually, the prosecution objected to parts of the closing argument. The judge sustained those objections. So not only are they trying to gag order President Trump, but they're actually trying to gag the defense. And I can't think of something that's more likely to produce a biased outcome than acting that way. Alan Dershowitz says a conviction in the Trump hush money trial will forever change the justice system.
Well, my question to you is, not being a legal, like a lot of our friends and neighbors out there, would this be the appropriate time for jury nullification? Because the way that the judge is acting, he almost seems like he's acting extrajudicially. I know I pronounced that wrong. It's okay.
Extrajudicially, yeah.
Absolutely. And he's acting in such a heavy-handed way. And then I can think of like 2 or 3 things just off the top of my head. What is the standing for who is actually being injured by this? There's so many problems with this case. And if they're able to find him guilty, then I feel like they could find anybody guilty.
Well, they haven't even proven the case by the standards that they said they would prove the case.
Right.
They are claiming that there was this payment that was premeditated and in itself was somehow illegal because it implicated federal campaign finance laws, whose violation they have not actually explained what that is. And so it's hard to figure out how you can violate an underlying law that they won't describe with something that's not a crime. And they called it, falsification of business records or something along those lines. But they've also added another twist to this, which is their chief star witness is a serial perjurer who also lied in the testimony that was provided. The objection, by the way, that was made by the prosecution was that the defense lawyer providing President Trump's closing argument said that the prosecution knew that Michael Cohen, the disgraced, convicted perjurer who used to be Trump's lawyer at one point, who presented no evidence other than hearsay of his own, that President Trump knew all about this, and therefore that it was a premeditated effort to influence the election. That's their case. The defense lawyer said that the prosecution knew that a serial perjurer was going to come up and lie on the stand, which he did.
And my question to you is does he have deals with the prosecution? Are they going to let him off early from his time in jail? And my question is, if you have a serial perjurer already, and he has the potential of getting a lessened sentence from telling a lie about his former employer, I just don't see how there's credibility there. I just don't see how this whole court case has been so mishandled. It really is
intentionally.
Well,
yeah, that's the problem. Is it's been mishandled intentionally because it's not a court case. It's a political operation.
Well, and that right there is totally against everything that every American stands for. I mean, we want the equality under the law. We want the rule of law. And if a millionaire, if you're one of those people out there that's a little bit more jaded than I am, and that feels like we really do have a 2-tiered system, then a millionaire should be able to get the best justice in the justice system. And if a former president of the United States can't get a fair shake when it comes to the rule of law, then none of us do.
Yeah, it's kangaroo court stuff.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody can be brought up in front of a Democrat partisan kangaroo court in a deep blue jurisdiction with a prosecutor that has set as his or her objective to get somebody, not to investigate a crime, find out who's responsible, and then bring charges forward. No, to get a person and just go find whatever they can depict as a crime, and then have a judge who, as Alan Dershowitz has described, he says, I don't know the reason, but it's obvious he is not unbiased in this case. He wants a conviction. Judges are not supposed to want a conviction. They're supposed to produce a fair trial according to the rules and the law. And this guy's like campaigning for one side. That's like the referee literally coming out and just, in a soccer match, just giving red cards to anybody who's playing well on the other side, because they want that team to lose.
And I don't know. I feel like the prosecuting attorney on this, there should be a moratorium. I don't think you should be able to write a book about how you went after a former president. I feel like this is such a big feather in that person's hat that, that's what their whole life, they're going to talk about at every social event. Hey, you want to hear about that time that I almost got the president of the United States?
Well, and I think that it's going to be overturned on appeal. It's got so many problems, but this is a political operation, and they don't care, because they'll bury the appeal in the media and they'll repeat over and over, which my understanding that what I heard this morning is that Joe Biden is going to speak to the nation. He's going to address the nation after the jury verdict, whatever it is.
Unacceptable.
Well, that's the height of like politicizing a legal case. And then just, I think it's at some point they realized, I guess we should stop pretending like we weren't behind all of this and that this wasn't a political operation, because it is. So let's just get the benefit of it. And then, through their, eating grin, they just go with it. But I think this is also because Joe Biden is so in trouble right now. When I saw that he was 13 points down in Nevada, a state that no Republican presidential candidate has won since 2004, and that state was a 50-50 proposition in 2020. Came very close. There was a lot of fraud alleged, and yet he's up by 13 percentage points, and it's pretty bad in Arizona and Georgia too. It's only in the Midwest states where there seems to be a toss-up, and some of those show Trump up. Trump was never up in 2020 in any poll in any of these states. He was always behind, and yet those were photo finish results. So I think Joe Biden's in trouble, and I think the Democratic Party might be in trouble, because on top of Joe Biden being they've decided to go down with that ship, is from what I can tell. And here's the latest evidence of that. The DNC is going to nominate Biden virtually before they get to the convention, because of a situation that exists in Ohio where state law requires that political parties certify their nominees 90 days before the general election, which would be August 7th. But the Democrats aren't holding their convention until August 19th through 22nd. And so here's what they're doing. They are holding a virtual convention where they're going to have the delegates all cast their votes from all 50 states before that date, so they can get through the Ohio law that exists, which there were some efforts in Ohio to change that law, but it kind of got deadlocked over some of the compromises that they couldn't find in doing that. I believe Alabama also had a similar problem. They did change their law to accommodate getting Biden on the ballot. But so they're going to, once they've nominated him, they're sort of committed. Like there isn't really a way to put the toothpaste back in the tube. He's the nominee. He will appear on these ballots no matter what. So that's it. So this stuff that I suspected for the longest time and still kind of figure they will figure a way to do it if they have to, that they will replace him, because he's getting worse, right? You've seen that too, right?
You think he's getting worse? I think that they got him juiced up bigger than the sky, and it seems like it's only a matter of time. I mean, they're running him hard.
He started talking the other day at West Point about how he was appointed to the Naval Academy by the U.S. senator that he eventually ran against and defeated in Delaware when he was 29 years old and first entered politics.
That's a heck
None
of
of
an
that
endorsement if it was real.
Well, you don't even get appointed by senators and congressmen. You get nominated,
Mm-hmm.
and then the academies themselves. I know a lot about this because I went through it. Only 1 in 10 actually get appointed out of who's nominated, which is a limited number of nominations to begin with. But he's imagining all this stuff, and he's going around and giving speeches where he says these things to people who all know better, and he claims things happened that never happened. He does it several times a week. He has no idea about what happened in his own life, which is something you actually should know. Even if you're not aware of what's happening in the world around you and you're reliant on other people to tell you, you should know what happened in your own life to your own family. He just doesn't. And it doesn't matter.
I mean, a simple check of whether Joe Biden should be president or not is we should ask our Democrat colleagues. We should say, would you trust him to drive your Uber? Would you trust him to be your doctor? Would you trust
him with 5,000 nuclear weapons?
I mean, I'm saying, would you trust him with your Uber Eats? I don't think
that's the problem. Biden has no brain. He has no functioning brain anymore, and people just point him to things, and then he just sort of he's a lot like I can't really like when you see a robot and it glitches and it just keeps repeating the same thing over and over as a malfunction and smoke starts coming out of its head. This is what he's doing, but he's doing it every day. And he's doing it. He did it in front of a foreign head of state that was visiting from, I think, like Nigeria or something last week.
Yeah, that was really bad. That was really bad. And I thought that was so unusual.
Well, they cut off the press conference because it was getting so bad that Karine Jean-Pierre, the single worst spokes idiot of all time, had to cut off the press conference because for her, it was even getting bad.
Well, I mean, I don't know who takes that job, but she takes the cake. I am blown away, and she definitely has a future in comedy because the stuff that she's doing now is just sad.
Yeah, and I see the mention there, Lori, of Mr. Magoo, but you know what? I thought Mr. Magoo was an endearing character.
Yeah.
This is like Mr. Magoo's alter ego. The paranoid conspiracy version of Mr. Magoo, who's out there talking about how the greatest threat to the country is a bunch of right wingers that are running around complaining about election integrity and questioning Joe Biden's actions and pushing back on phony show trials of his political opponent. He thinks that's the biggest threat. This is the same guy, by the way, who's letting terrorists across the southern border every day. And some of them are trying to get onto military bases. We don't even have enough time in this show to go into just the things that have happened in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Of people that have been caught trying to enter military bases. And it turns out that they have Islamic, radical, Middle East affiliations or Chechen affiliations. Like, these are people that are going to kill someone.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy, who's supposed to be protecting the country, is concerned about things that have nothing to do with protecting the country.
Well, and as these incidents ramp up and become more and more of a commonplace, I'm getting really concerned. There was an explosion that happened earlier today, and normally in news events, they try to give you some indication of what happened. But this one, they just say, oh, we don't know. We absolutely don't know what happened. And there were 7 people that were harmed, and it happened in a bank. And I don't know. I'm really concerned because the press that we're getting is really really bad. Like it's just poor quality.
Well, they're
Media.
satisfied with not having those details. It's like the trans person who was it in Nashville
Mhm.
that shot up the school and then eventually got taken out. Um, and they did a manifesto that was hidden and suppressed for like 6 months or 8 months or something.
Till it wasn't on the
Why?
news anymore.
Yeah,
Well, they're and that's the thing is, why do you have to cover for these people if it's not somehow going to? I mean, is it going to hurt your platform? Is it because you want more people like this and less
because they don't
people?
believe in equal justice under the law anymore, and they don't believe in protecting the country because the thing you would put first
Yep.
is bringing to light the nature of the threat against the country and then trying to account for who did it so you can stop them. And instead, they wait to find out who it is and then decide if they're going to tell you the information.
Yeah.
Because apparently, some people, it's okay if they do insane, murderous things, and other people, even much less consequential actions, have to be vilified in the media. And that's what's happening now. I think the Democrats are heading for a real Donnybrook, a real what's the Napoleon's Waterloo. I think they're heading for a repeat of the 1968 convention. This one's going to be in Chicago, and ironically enough, so was the 1968 convention. The night Chicago died. That's a famous song about it, and they're going to have literally, because they've invited this and they've pandered to them and they've actually reacted to the pressure from these pro Hamas groups
Mhm.
that have been fanning out in college campuses and in cities across the country. And Representative Dean Phillips, a Democrat from Minnesota who did run against Biden, he said that he believes that the Democratic Party should forego the convention this year.
Yeah.
And he expressed concerns that things are looking awfully like 1968, and there could be a lot of violence. And he had some compliments for Biden on Israel, but he acknowledged that Biden's actions recently have upset both progressives and those on the other side of the issue. Because he can't it's dividing the Democrat Party. That's really what this means. And he said that they should just pretend like there is no convention and just move on.
Hmm. Well, and it's just telling because I've been thinking about this from the beginning. It really doesn't seem like the Democrat Party. Um, if you're a member of the Democrat Party and you watch the show, I think that it's crazy because it doesn't seem like you're getting much of a choice. You don't get to choose your nominee, and then once you do have that nominee, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't sound like a good deal for anybody, and
It's
um,
rigged. Yeah, I mean
if you
they've gone from rigging general elections to
yeah.
rigging primary elections.
Well, I mean, a few years back, like every time that the good old Bernie Sanders would come along, and he'd talk about the millionaires and billionaires, he would be able to bankroll a few $1 million out of the deal whenever he would go into that, and then back out last minute and then toss it on to Biden. But I think everybody realizes that this is one big scam, and we were talking about before we came on James Carville, the Democratic strategist. He was talking about how the DNC has just done an absolutely horrible time when it comes to communicating and to communicating policies and stuff like that out to the general public and the different special interest groups that are going on. And because of this, Biden's seeing really terrible numbers when it comes to the African American vote, the Latino vote, the single mother vote, all of these different things. Now, that's not to say that the Republican Party is doing gangbusters and we're doing great on it. We need to be as competitive as we possibly can.
Well, and that's starting to happen, right? Actually,
Yep.
this is a good time to mention that story you and I discussed before we went live here, which is it looks like both Biden and Trump are ratcheting up their appeals to black voters. But this is not a sign of strength for Biden.
No.
If Biden is having to ratchet up his appeal to black voters, it's
He's
because
lost
he's
it.
at risk of not having as much of the black vote as he would expect or needs.
Mhm.
And there's swing states that if he doesn't get enough of the black vote, which is somewhere in the order of 90%, if it's 80%, he loses a whole
Georgia.
swath of states. He loses Georgia. He loses North Carolina. It affects Pennsylvania. It certainly affects Michigan big time, and even Wisconsin. And so these are states where the victories are by less than 10, 20, 30,000 votes, and they're at risk of losing the black vote. And of course, we already know what's been happening with the Hispanic vote.
Mhm.
But this is a voting block that's usually just been totally dead reliable, and apparently they don't like him.
Well, I hate to say it, he's incoherent. And whenever I've talked to African American voters in Portland, in my precinct, they just clown on him. There is nothing
Yeah, they
good
think
to
he's
say
a
about the
fool.
guy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's just one big joke. They say he's an embarrassment. They say they take anybody but Biden now.
Yeah, it says here that these same polls that were indicating that he's in trouble with African American men, especially,
Hmm.
that it said that he is garnering somewhere around 20%. President Trump is garnering about 20% of the black vote. That's enough to swing all those states because that is usually they get 90%.
Yeah.
And then it shows in the same polls that the two candidates, Biden and Trump, are in a dead heat amongst 18 to 29-year-old Hispanic voters. President Biden won more than 60% of those votes in those demographics in 2020. And they say it's the same states. They said 5 of the 6 battleground states are the ones that he's down in where this problem is happening. They mentioned Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, Arizona, and Nevada. Biden's only leading by like a point in Wisconsin. And then I mentioned North Carolina. I mean, North Carolina basically waved that one goodbye if you can't get the black vote in North Carolina.
Yep.
Also, there's a lot of, it's becoming more important that somebody's working class than their ethnic identity or racial identity. Because once they identify with this, they're actually finding that the elites who don't mind that you're suffering through inflation and have all this crime in the streets, those are white suburban female liberals who just don't care what happens to black and Hispanic working class people.
Yep. Well, and it's totally true. Whenever I was growing up down in Tampa, it was people who worked or people whose parents paid for them.
Yeah.
It wasn't black, it wasn't white, it wasn't Puerto Rican. It was do your parents have to go work, or are you a trust fund kid?
Yeah.
And I think that you see those ripples going out even more, especially in good old Portland here. Either you're working or your parents, they worked and now you don't have to. And so I definitely see that.
Well, and some of these policies that are taking people off, we know that border security has ascended to the top of the list of issues and it's stayed there. Well, this is what the Democrats don't seem to get it. Democrat mayors are asking President Biden to give work permits to millions of illegal immigrants. They claim it's going to be good for the economy, even though it's been debunked by studies repeatedly. They're out there saying this, which means that they aren't just saying, well, let's back off on these policies. Let's go pedal to the metal because that's what we want to do. And it's almost like they don't care if the effect in the election is catastrophic. They just don't care. Now, I will say it's not a uniform approach because at the same time, there were 15 members of Congress Democrats who sent a letter to Biden last week or 2 weeks ago, begging him to take executive action to get the border under control. Now, these are people that have repeatedly voted on a party line basis to defend the Biden border policies. And so they're starting to feel, some of the members of Congress are feeling the heat. Turns out that Biden is apparently considering some major new executive actions And of course, he's the cause of it. But he's
Yeah.
always said that he couldn't fix it just by executive action. And that's what many of these Democrats in Congress said. But now he's saying he can. I don't know what it's going to be that he's going to do, but a few strokes of his pen, or as Obama used to say, with his pen and his phone, he can go and do all of these impressive things. Well, maybe some of the panic is starting to set in.
Well, I think that the situation is pretty troubling, because my question is what does he intend to do? Because it's not going to be secure the southern border.
No,
I think that he's going to make it massively worse for everyday Americans. And if you want to know what's going to hurt working class Americans, is a flood of cheap, unskilled labor coming into the workforce. Literally, I mean, 10 million people. What's the estimate currently, Kevin? Is it more than 10 million have come in over the Biden administration?
yeah,
Let's
it's
say
right around 10. Yeah.
let's say 10 million people, and then for, like, let's say the state of Oregon, we have let's say 250,000 people for the state of Oregon coming into our state. Where are they going to live? Where are they going to work?
Well, they're flying and busing them to all, using nonprofits to all different corners of the state. And apparently this is their plan, is that they're going to stick them everywhere that they can. We also know that there was a bill in the House of Representatives that did pass, but of course it'll get stuck in the Senate, which would which would require the counting of, in the census, to tally whether or not someone is actually a citizen or non-citizen, and then to exclude the non-citizens from the census for the purpose of reapportionment of Congress. The Democrats voted against that. Now, that's the current way it's been construed, but Congress, if they take action, can change that for the next census. Democrats voted against it because they know that if this continues, then areas that are sanctuary cities and states that are magnets for all of these all the illegal migrants that are being brought in by the millions will cause those places to get greater representation in Congress, simply because they shipped in millions of illegal migrants to inflate their numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So they literally they're saying, we don't care about citizenship anymore.
Yeah. Elon Musk, he was talking about this, and he was talking about the fact that since they get more seats, then that's all they really care about. They just want to shove in more seats on our federal representation, because ultimately the big power brokers, they don't care about what happens in our state. They just want to be able to make their wheeling and dealing on the national level. And if you have to flood the country in order to get two more of your buddies into Congress, and so be it. Lori's talking about their objective is letting them vote. Maybe in the future, but I think that they want
There's a
to.
bill on that one too. It's to actually prohibit them from voting and require states to purge from their voter rolls anybody who cannot prove that they're citizens of the United States.
Yeah.
That actually is a bill in the House of Representatives right now.
Well,
and if that were to pass, it won't be signed by Biden, but it puts the lie to the fact that actually they know that in many of these states there are lots of people registered who are not legally allowed to register to vote, and they don't want anyone to even know or be able to get rid of them off their voter rolls, because they kind of have a hunch as to how they're going to vote.
Well, and I was under the impression that in Oregon, when you go get your driver's license and you're registered, and you are not a citizen, but you live in Oregon and it is your state of residence, people vote on it. People vote for local elections. Is that correct? Have you heard the same?
Yeah, there are places in the country that have actually said that they are expressly permitting non-citizens to vote in elections. One of them is the District of Columbia, and that was actually a bill in Congress to prohibit that, to vacate, essentially, because they can't overrule the District of Columbia because it's not a state. and that's a good reason for it to not become a state, by the way, is that District of Columbia, the very far left mayor who won't actually protect anybody that's in their city, they passed an ordinance saying that they would allow people to vote who are not citizens, and the Congress actually has the final say. And the House of Representatives voted, and there were actually a lot of Democrats, about 54 Democrats who joined Republicans to vote to prohibit that. So some people can't bear the standing with that facade anymore, because they know it's going to have electoral consequences. From 54 Democrats voted for that bill because they know that if they had to go back home and defend that in their home district, they get scorched. So, and appropriately so.
And you know, Kevin, it's super easy to, if you want to vote in America, all you got to do is become a citizen. It's that easy.
Yeah.
Just become a citizen. Love our country, uphold our laws, and become a citizen. And
like every other country in the world. Like every other country in the world, you know, which is fine. That's how it should be. So here's an interesting story, kind of a local flavor. Dick Hughes, who is a reporter with the Oregon Capital Insider, he wrote an article saying, "Will Oregon Republicans move to the center?" And, you know, we always get these provocative stories around election time, but this is Reagan Knopp, who's kind of a political consultant and also has a podcast and does a lot of social media. He said, "I'm an Oregon Republican. I think it's time for our party to stop denying election results and focus on winning elections instead." I don't know if those are mutually exclusive, other than the fact that if you can only focus on one thing, then winning elections is a smart idea, because that's actually how you can correct what's happening with our election system, is by winning enough seats to be able to do that.
Yep.
But Dick Hughes said that seems like good advice, and he was referring to some of the things, like there was a recent court case that Senator Dennis Linthicum, who's the Republican nominee for the Secretary of State, was a co-plaintiff on, that the Supreme Court refused to hear. And it was about whether or not vote by mail as a system is unconstitutional due to its susceptibility to fraud. It is illegal, by the way, in almost all European countries. Vote by mail for this reason. Germany, France, the UK, it's illegal. But here it's super awesome. And so, but anyway, is it a good campaign issue versus being a legal issue? Is it a good campaign issue? And I think that's what he was bringing up in this article. But at the same time, vote by mail was supposed to dramatically increase voter turnout. And what we saw in the primary is voter turnout was extremely low. It was at the lower end of normal, is the way they put it. And so it's actually maybe not delivering on its promise in this case.
Well, in addition to that, he sounds like he's a younger guy, right? So he wants to lean progressive a little bit.
Reagan's younger. Dick Hughes, not so much.
Okay.
He's old.
Well, I see some of our younglings, our younger people within our party system. They want to come up with solutions. They want to see us win, but at the same time, you can never back down from your morality and for what you truly stand for. And you know, some of us Republicans, you know, we have different feelings when it comes to this subject or that, but ultimately at the end of the day, we need to stand strong when it comes to our core beliefs, and what is right and what is wrong, and there's no horse jockeying about it. If you want to truly change the system that we live in, we do have to win, and maybe there's a tactical way for us to do that by addressing these issues slightly different, but never shy away from the truth, because that is the most powerful weapon we have. Exposing.
That's why Joe Biden's losing so badly.
Exactly.
We're speaking the truth, and
it's clear he's lying. He's lying when he comes to the economy. He is lying when it comes to about crime and law and order, and he is lying when it comes to the international stage. And it's just the truth.
And Biden
And
is losing on the things that he's lying and can't get away with it.
mhm.
Like inflation. Like, you're not experiencing inflation. Inflation's much better. I'm like, well, wait a second. Everything costs 40% more than when you took office. So,
Yeah.
I think that this is where
But you're making so much more, Kevin, right? You're making so much more.
you're making so much more. It's just so much less than what you need to keep the same lifestyle as 4 years ago.
Yep.
And people can do that math because they're living it. There's a
Mhm.
lot of other things they're experiencing. They know that crime is higher. They know that homelessness and addiction have skyrocketed. They know actually that their schools aren't getting better, that they're actually getting worse, and they're dissatisfied with them. There's so many things. So I think maybe the takeaway from this discussion and from this article is that we have reasons to be optimistic because the things that everybody does know, we just need to tell the truth about and stick to our guns and press that advantage, because there really isn't a good defense other than lying.
Yeah.
There isn't a good defense for the truth.
Mhm.
And all we have to do is continue to press ahead and expose that. And we do have we started the show by talking about the opportunities we have in Congress. We have opportunities for Attorney General, Secretary of State, and also Treasurer. We have opportunities in the State House and State Senate, and they all portend for opportunities 2 years later for the governor's mansion, which is why we need to do a good job now. So we should win on the issues that we can win on,
Mhm.
and then make the changes we need to make that go beyond just those core issues that we know we can move voters with.
And I'm reaching out to all of you Republicans out there. Um, Understand this, that just because people aren't passionate about the specific thing that you're talking about in the moment, understand that they may be thinking about it from a different tactically. Um, I know that there's a lot of kerfuffle in our county parties and things like that because one person may feel really strongly about this one and not necessarily about this one. It could purely and simply be the way that they're gaming the system. For me, I feel very, very strongly about the abolishment of abortion in the state of Oregon. However, if that's what I campaign on, if that's my one thing, and I'm the champion for that in the state of Oregon, I'll never get elected. I will not get elected, and
Well,
because of this, we need to focus on other points that are going to work for to get people elected into office in Portland. But once we're in there, then we can do the work that's going to be able to make it. It's not going to happen right away. It needs to be incremental, and we need to claw back those ideas, or we need to claw back those things that are plain and simple truths.
and gain credibility with voters by offering them better governance and better policies, and a restoration of law and order and a reduction of inflation and things that we know actually will impact what they're doing. And then there will be fertile ground for them to listen on many other issues. I also
Mhm.
think that it depends on what office you're running for, what
Yeah.
you can affect.
Mhm.
County commissioners can affect certain things more than anybody else. We learned that during COVID, but we
Yeah.
also learned that in some cases, state representatives and state senators have the main say when it comes to the issue of abortion. The Dobbs decision by the Supreme Court, actually took that out of the hands of the courts,
Mhm.
especially at the federal level, and put it back into the states, which is where the people's elected representatives can actually make those decisions. And then you have to persuade
Yes.
voters and elected officials to take positions on that. Congress, on the other hand, that might be a place where you want to play defense on that issue, because the Democrats actually want to pass and override every state's decision with a nationwide abortion law that would impose this on every state.
Yeah.
And this is something that, if we're smart and we think about this, it's both, what are the issues that actually persuade people, and then also, what is the office somebody's running for, and what difference can they make in the larger picture on any issue. And I hope this is something that, we have to have some electoral IQ to outperform the Democrats. The
Absolutely.
Democrats have a lot of institutional advantages, but we can be smart, and they've actually made a huge number of mistakes. So let's take advantage of those. They're starting to reject some of their own progressives. Mike Schmidt is heading out now. The Schmidt show is going to be over in Multnomah County, which is great.
I don't think he's gone though. I think he'll pop up his greasy little head.
Yeah, he'll show up somewhere in the state government, probably. They got rid of the progressive mayor in Salem, and of course, they were trying to get rid of Tootie Smith in Clackamas County. Jamie McLeod Skinner and Janelle Bynum. I also look at some of this claimed moderation of Democrats as more of a head fake. If anybody believes Janelle Bynum is a centrist, then
she is, as long as you keep moving the political system over to the left, right? So all of these people, it's so interesting.
You go to the radical left, then
the
left
radical left is the moderate now, and she's gonna be the the conservative Democrat, right? And so it's just really interesting because I just think about like the situation with the students blockading themselves inside of a library. By every definition, according to the Department of Justice, what they did was terrorism.
Yeah.
Cut and dry, 100%. And then when you see that the way that they were treated like kids that were overstaying their stay doing a sleepover. And it's just our whole system keeps shifting farther to the left. And it's not Republicans that are need to move to the center. It's the political system needs to move back in the correct direction. We need conservative Democrats to say, you guys are nuts, and you put your nuts in the crazy bucket over there.
Yeah, and we also got to call like it is with Biden. He was supposed to be this moderate, remember? Then he made a deal with Bernie Sanders, and he handed over the entire government to the Bernie Sanders and Obama acolytes, and look what they've done with it.
Well, I don't think he had the team in place on the ground in order to do anything but take on, that entire leadership circle that was we're just going to keep on going in the same pace in the same direction. And, the one thing that will stand out in my mind forever and eternity when it comes to Biden was that terrifying speech that he did about unity. And he had the Marine Corps there, and they had like red background.
Yeah.
It seemed like something out of a Star Wars movie, the villain doing a monologue. That's not presidential. It's not like, and he talked about being, the unifier in chief or whatever, but every speech he does, he divides us.
We also know he wasn't smart enough to come up with that whole scheme. Someone else came up with that and said, go do this. And then they just gave him a script and he read it. So he's an accomplice to it. But somebody's masterminding this stuff, and that's who's really running the country. And we've just got to get rid of them. And it's going to be a lot more than replacing Biden. It's really going to be, there's going to have to be a real draining of the swamp, a real outing of all these people that are embedded in the federal bureaucracy, because they're trying to destroy the country, and it's so obvious. Yeah. But I also think that there's another thing that we should keep in mind here as we head into the home stretch of the election. There are events that can come and interrupt what happens. We have to remain vigilant. I don't know if there could be another war, because none of the ones that have happened were predictable in so much as someone could have said, I think there's going to be an invasion of Ukraine on this date.
Right.
However, I think if we look back at the seminal event of Biden's presidency, the one thing presidents have the most control over is foreign policy and national security. They do. And there could be an event that occurs as a result of the open southern border. But I think what he did with Afghanistan and that withdrawal has led to at least 3 wars because of deterrence breaking down. If you want to interrupt the conversation of almost any other political topic, have our country faced with a massive mobilization because of wars that could have been prevented. I'm concerned about that. I think that there's a lot of young people who are going to have a different feeling about Democrat politicians once they're being drafted to go fight a war that should have never happened.
Well, and I agree with you 100%. And it is a deep concern of mine that we've allowed the international conversation to sink so low when it comes to the respect of our nation, worldwide, and it's unacceptable to me. And I really feel like that needs to change in this next presidential cycle, and we need to have a president that regains that that standing in the world. And the idea of a looming conflict in my mind is my thing stopped for a second. The idea of a large scale conflict in my mind is something that seems very possible, and we pray for peace.
We do, and I know that you just wind the clock 4 years ago back, and we had peace. We had peace, and we also had more peace breaking out, and we had an economy that was very strong. What we're facing now is the reality that it's really hard to put that toothpaste back in the tube. It really is. Once things spin out of control and become this unpredictable, restoring that, it's a ton of cure, not just a pound of cure versus that ounce of prevention. And our country's actually been very successful by
world standard.
Yeah, and also by engaging in the ounce of prevention when it was smart. Deterrence prevented massive major wars for 70 years. We had smaller ones, but we didn't have huge ones. And I just fear that in just 4 short years, it's broken down. And it will be hard to fix that again, because it's hard to convince bad guys around the world to stop doing bad stuff without actually having to take action, when it could have been done with some much more subtle moves and being taken seriously. President Trump, there's a lot of things that people try to say, like people around the world didn't like him, including many of our allies. But you know what? They knew what country he considered number one on his list. And they knew what he was looking out for. And he was right about literally everything he said. Many of them have learned hard lessons about where they're getting their natural gas from, or whether or not they should be standing firm and defending the United States as an ally, or that they should be paying their fair share, because frankly, we can get stretched thin. And so that's what's happened. But I don't think they believe that a senile old man who's not really running the country is somebody that any ally around the world can count on.
Well, and I think about that a lot. I was just watching a video talking about the reaction to Kim Jong-un when Donald Trump went there. And I have to say, I was super impressed. It seemed like a courageous move to cross that DMZ line. And, you don't see stuff like that. I mean, you see Barack Obama go down to Kenya, and you can see the stark contrast. I know they're somewhat of an ally, but the whole reason why they sent Obama down there is because we're losing face when it comes to the international standing of America. And our enemies are pushing the BRICS economic system on the rest of the world. And we're standing by, and we're allowing our our allies worldwide to just, fall away. And it's a mistake.
Well, I know that I'm hopeful. We're the grand optimistic party here. So we know that we can actually turn it around, and we're going to keep telling the truth here every day on this show and making sure that all of you get to hear it, even if the rest of the media doesn't get around to it. But I want to thank you, Stephen, for joining me here tonight. I know we got to get you to your next meeting, but I really appreciate you jumping on. As always, great conversation, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It's always a pleasure. You guys have a wonderful night, and anytime.
And everyone that's watching, please share this show with everyone you can. And we'll be back tomorrow night with the next episode of The Captive Audience. It should be Sunny and Dawn back in the routine, and we look